Hello and welcome back to Bookish, and welcome to my Saturday Hodgepodge, my weekly wrap-up of all things reading, bookishness, booktube stuff, anything else I want to talk about. I think this is going to be a fairly packed Saturday Hodgepodge, so I'm going to try to move through things relatively quickly, and hopefully I'll leave timestamps down below. So I wanted to start off with a July wrap-up. July was a really weird reading month for me. I didn't feel like I was in a reading slump, but at the end of the month I look at the books that I read, and they're not very many, and I look at the books I intended to read and that I didn't, and I think, well, that wasn't my best reading month. I'm not sure exactly why that is. I had one really disappointing read, one kind of a slog of read, and then two rereads that I finished, and maybe that has something to do with it. Maybe it was I felt like I didn't get to the books that I wanted to read. You know, we'll see how that goes. But here we go. Wrap up. I did read The Town by William Faulkner. This is a part of Faulkner in August, and this year we're doing Summer of Snopes, where we read Faulkner's The Snopes trilogy. The Hamlet was in June, The Town is in July, and I'll be starting The Mansion to finish up the Snopes trilogy in August. I found this to be a satisfying reread. I thought it was a little bit better than The Hamlet. Like The Hamlet, there are a few things in here which I found to be off-putting, either in the content of the novel or sometimes just in the style that Faulkner chose in writing them. This is, you know, not a masterpiece by Faulkner. It does contain flaws, but a really good book. And I think, if I've mentioned before in my Where Not to Start with William Faulkner, the Hamlet and the other books in the Snopes trilogy are a good entree point, I think, for reading Faulkner. Then I buddy read Manhattan Transfer by John Dos Passos. I buddy read this with Fraser from Fraser Simon Springboard Thought. That's his channel, and I really enjoyed this reread. You know, this is a book which is clearly the prelude to Dos Passos' masterpiece, the USA trilogy. It's far from a perfect book, but there were elements in this book I thought were great, were truly kind of modernist achievements. I think Dos Passos sets out a fairly, you know, original style of American modernism that's influenced by Joyce and by other modernists, both Americans and Europeans, and he comes up with something that's pretty unique. I think this book is very good, and if you're looking for a place to start reading Dos Passos to kind of get in on the modernism and I think the greatest parts of Dos Passos' work, this is not a bad starting point. Then the disappointing buddy read, a buddy read A Death Comes to Pemberley by P.D. James. A buddy read this with Kim from Middle of the Book March. This is a mystery set at Pemberley, the family home of Mr. Darcy and his young wife Elizabeth Bennet Darcy, and this book was just really, really disappointing. It spends a lot more time on fan fiction than the mystery. The mystery itself isn't really necessarily even a mystery, and I discussed this before, so I won't go into more depth, but it was really disappointing by a book by an author that I really liked, P.D. James. And then also, I read this for Jane Austen July, and then also for Jane Austen July, I read Jane Austen A Life by Claire Tomalin, a biography of Jane Austen by a respected biographer, and this was a bit of a slog for me, and I'm not sure it's Claire Tomalin's fault, even though I do have some issues with her choices and style. I think that the problem is that Jane Austen lived a short life about which there are very few actual documents that actually give us insight into her life, and therefore Tomalin, like I think a lot of biographers, feels the need to kind of fill out a bigger biography by telling us a lot about her family. So we get a lot of in-depth information about cousins and her brothers and her sisters-in-law and their business dealings and their marriages and their money and their wealth, and all that certainly affects Jane Austen, but the simple truth of the matter is there's not a lot of documentation of Jane Austen's life, and so if you're going to write a long biography you have to fill it with other things. Jane Austen dies in the biography. She dies relatively young. I think she was around 40. She dies relatively young, and her death is described like 20-something pages before the end of the biography. And so a lot of the rest of the biography is a discussion, not necessarily of her works and how they were published posthumously, but of every one of her family members who we've been introduced to. And certainly those things might need to be summed up, and bring us back to the people who she spent more time talking about than Jane Austen. But it did feel like a lot for a biography of Jane Austen, and what the part I was interested in was Jane Austen herself and the writing of her novels and her books. And so if you've never read a Jane Austen biography, unless you're interested in kind of the full family picture of the Austens and their relations and acquaintances, maybe go for a shorter one. Many people have recommended a shorter Jane Austen biography, and if I can remember the name of it and remember to do it, I will put the name of that biography down below in the information section, of this video. I had also started reading Africa's World War, Congo, the Rwanda Genocide, and the Making of Continental Catastrophe by Gerard, Prunier, and I really was enjoying this, but I essentially just stopped reading it on page 72. I haven't picked it up this week, in part because I was determined to get through the Tomalin biography, and maybe I should have DNF'd it, but I haven't picked this up. I still have a couple of days left in July, and so I'm planning on concentrating on that. And then, the book I said I really was excited to read, River of the Gods, Genius and Betrayal in the Search for the Source of the Nile by Candace Millard, one of my favorite popular historians. I never even open this book to begin reading it, so maybe that's why it feels disappointing. And then, surprisingly, yesterday I decided I wanted to reread the Silmarillion. In part, I thought this would, help me be better prepared and remind me of things to watch the Rings of Power Netflix series, which is coming out. So I read about 100 pages of it, and I thought to myself, is the Rings of Power Netflix series really going to go over the Silmarillion? And come to find out, it's not. It's more likely apparently centered in the information you can find in the appendix sections that come at the end of The Return of the King, the third volume of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. So that was not wasted time. I enjoyed reading it, but the purpose for which I was reading it has now kind of disappeared. Anyway, there's my wrap up for July, and so now on to my TBR for August. So August is Women in Translation Month, and I've never kind of fully thrown myself into Women in Translation Month. I usually read 1 or 2 books, but this year I thought I really want to kind of hit the Women in Translation Month thing hard. So I just went through authors I'd read before, books by authors that I know were in translation I've heard about on Booktube, just kind of randomly picking, and this is what I came up with. So I have 5 books for Women in Translation Month. The first is The End of Days by Jenny Erpenbeck. Jenny Erpenbeck is a German author. I read her book Visitation a couple of years ago when Britta Böhler and others were encouraging us to read more German literature. And while I read that book and I enjoyed it, at the time I thought, well, I'm kind of mad about it, but the longer it's gone, the more I find myself thinking about that book, which is primarily about a home or a piece of property in Germany in the years before German unification, and then all the way through World War I and World War II and the Cold War, and the transition that different families and groups make, and the changes they bring to that home. And it really just kind of has some images and ideas that have lasted. And so I thought, Women in Translation Month, I'm going to give Jenny Erpenbeck another shot. So I bought The End of Days. I think I bought it because I like the name, and it's got this cool tombstone thing. Then, for reasons that I still don't quite understand, I bought Strange Weather in Tokyo. I know I've heard somebody talk about this book. It's by Hiromi Kawakami. By the way, before I move on, Jenny Erpenbeck's The End of Days is translated by Susan Bernovsky. Strange Weather in Tokyo by Hiromi Kawakami is translated by Allison, Markin, Powell. And this is probably the book that's the most random that I picked up. I heard some good things about Hiromi Kawakami. Now I know there's another Japanese author whose last name is Kawakami too, but I chose this one on purpose, and I do really like the cover. Maybe this is my month for cover buys. And then a book that it seems like everybody on part of Booktube has been talking about, and that's Claudia Pinero's Elena Knows, translated by Francis Riddle. I've heard nothing but praise for this book, and I'm really looking forward to getting to it. Short book. Also, one of the benefits, I think, one of the things that seems to be consistent with my choices for Women in Translation Month is they're relatively short. And then I'm finally going to get around to reading my first book by Anne Erneaux, and that's The Years. And The Years was translated by Allison L. Strayer. And so I'm going to get to, I'm going to read that this month. So then also the other book I wanted to read for Women in Translation Month is Disoriental by Negar Djavadi, which is translated by Tina Kover. This is a book I've also heard a lot about and a lot of good things on Booktube, and Tina Kover has appeared on Sean the Book Maniac's channel. I'm really looking forward to reading that. I'll have more to say about this book here in just a minute. And then on top of those 5 books, I also have, as I mentioned earlier, The Mansion, the 3rd book of the Snoke trilogy, that's part of Faulkner in August, which I'll actually read in August. And then I decided that I wanted to read Dune. A while back I did that tag, why haven't I read these books yet? And, you were supposed to focus to a certain extent on books and genres that you wish you'd read, and somehow I forgot Dune. But Dune is probably that genre book, that sci-fi book that I should have read a long time ago. And so I decided to read this, and I've talked my son into buddy reading this with me, and hopefully he will appear in some of my videos, and we'll discuss our progress in Dune. So there's that. That's my TBR. A strange thing happened, though, when I got my copy of Disoriental by Negar and Djavadi. And that is, the book is printed, I don't know if you can see it, the book is printed upside down and on the page, and the print goes off the edge of the page. So this book is unreadable. By the way, it also goes to the very edge of the page, and some words are cut off. So this book was unreadable. Fortunately, I ordered this book from bookshop.org. Bookshop.org in the U.S., and they have branches in other countries. Bookshop.org is an excellent choice if you want to avoid Amazon. Bookshop.org actually kicks money back to independent bookstores that are part of their network. You can actually choose a bookstore, an independent bookstore near you that you want part of the proceeds of the sales to go to. And not only that, what I found out is they have an excellent customer service department. I contacted them, telling them about the problem with this book. There was also a problem where there wasn't packing slip in my package like they were supposed to be, so I would know how to return it. And within 2 days, the problem was solved. A representative from bookshop.org contacted me, and they're sending me another copy of the book, which they assure me is not printed backwards and upside down. So I'm looking forward to getting that, and this is an unabashed plug for bookshop.org. I'll make sure I leave the bookshop.org link down below as well. Also, in my video in which I talked about, which was a response to Steve Donahue's video about top 10 tips for booktubers, also in that video I seconded Steve's statement that you should hold books up where people can see them, they can read the title and the author, as something is important to do here on Booktube. And in that video I held up this book. It was called If I Were a Hippo, and Jen from Remembered Reads asked me if I was going to be talking about If I Were a Hippo, and I am. But before I do that, let me just mention that If I Were a Hippo is a book very similar to some of the books I love by Sandra Boynton. For instance, this book, Hippos Go Berserk, which has lots of hippos in it, and then the classic Sandra Boynton book, But Not the Hippopotamus. Sandra Boynton, one of my favorite children's authors, even though this book is not by Sandra Boynton, one of my favorite children's authors because she, oftentimes has hippos in her book, and hippos are my favorite animal. I'm wearing my I Got a Kiss from Fiona t-shirt. Fiona is a hippo born in captivity in the Cincinnati Zoo. And so I thought I would just take you through, just because Jen asked, If I Were a Hippo, and talk about why it's so special. So one of the things that makes it special is it has a hippo tail that sticks right out of the top. That's awesome. The nose here on the front is plush. It's kind of made of a plush material, and then each one of the pages has a different texture. It's clearly a book intended for a very, very young child to be able to feel the textures about how the coat feels. The toenails are scratchy like Velcro. The nose again is nice and plush and squishy. You can't turn the page. Let's see. The ears are shiny. Hope I don't get a copyright strike. And then there's this really cool page with the hippo in the mud. And so, this book is on my desk at all time, as is Hippos Go Berserk. I don't know where my copy of But Not the Hippopotamus is, but hippos are my jam, and I really love Sandra Boynton books. And so I thought I would mention that here as well. Oh, also, some of you may know that I have been working on completing a manuscript of what is in effect a military history about my uncle's military unit during World War II. I have finished almost all the revisions on that. I have a few things to look up to fill in some blanks, and I still have a few endnotes to write. I really haven't been too busy about that, but I did actually query a publisher about that, and I am anxiously waiting to see if they're interested in seeing any of the chapters or any of that material. So for right now, I'm not really working on a writing project, even though I am already thinking about and have planned my next writing project and what I want to write about. So I may begin research on that, because to be honest with you, the research is one of the things I find to be the most fun. But just a little update there. So if you're wondering if I'm still writing, the answer is I have that project ready to be submitted, and now I'm just looking for a publisher who might be interested in it. So that's kind of where I went with that. And then I wanted to finish up today's video with some shout-outs. Shout-outs to 2 new booktubers and 2 booktubers who have been around for a while, who I just think are just killing it with what they're putting on their channel. So my first shout-out goes to Cynthia from Book Whimsy. Cynthia is a scholar, reads widely, charming person, and incredibly intelligent. And she's been doing a series on TikTok and then importing the TikTok videos to her channel about the history of reproductive rights in relationship to abortion and other issues. And I think they're great, so I'll leave a link to Cynthia's channel down below. Also, Matt Wall, writer, poet, irreverent booktuber, has just been doing some great content on his channel, which I've really been enjoying. So I'll provide a link to at least one of his videos, and of course I'll put his channel in notifications below. And then 2 new channels. One is Reading Aster. They have a really, I think, ironic and wonderful sense of humor, unique approach to books. In their latest video, they were doing some kind of a summer readathon with a bingo thing, which I watched the whole video, even though I'm not really aware of what kind of summer readathon they're a part of. But I watched the video, and they went out and did some vlog footage, and I just thought it was great. And they have fewer than 100 subscribers, so please at least go check them out. And then also I wanted to shout out Dia from the channel Novel Idea. Really cool play on words, and she's just delightful, calm manner, really well-spoken, well-thought-out videos. I'll put a link to her latest video, which is a Friday Reads or a Friday Wrap-Up video below. And then I forgot, I also want to shout out a channel which I really enjoy, and that's Idget Reads and Rambles, and the creator over there is named Quentin. Somehow Quentin still has fewer than 100 subscribers. He deserves far more. I'm not sure he wants more, but I'm shouting him out anyway. And so I'll leave a link to his channel down below too. Please go check out those new channels and those old channels and give those people some love and support. Anyway, there you go. There is my Saturday Hodgepodge for this week. I look forward to your comments in the comment section below. And as always, thank you for watching.